Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We've got a lot coming at you, and I'm really glad you're joining us. So we are going to be covering some breaking news from the Commonwealth. We've got good news for Democrats coming to us from Louisville. We got bad news from workers in Hardin County. We're going to be joined by BlueOval SK worker Halee Hadfield, who's been on the show before when we had better news, I think, about their union organizing drive. But we're going to share a social media study and contrast between Massey and our friend Garland Hale Barr the Fourth. And then we're going to be turning to our featured interview, chatting with author Vanessa Williamson, who has just released The Price of Democracy, a book about taxation and the revolutionary power of taxation in American history. So I promise it'll be more interesting than it sounds. Maybe you're not like me. Maybe you think, oh, taxes, that's fascinating. But if you are more like me, I'm telling you, it's a pretty cool story. So that's what we're going to be doing. But before we do it, I want to make sure that you're here and ready to help take Trump's power. We are sorely in need of significant political change in Kentucky. And for the next year or so, Progress Kentucky is laser focused on flipping the 6th district and key state house seats that are within that 16 county congressional district. Right now, we got 4 great candidates running for the 6th, but we're looking beyond the primary, working to shift the electorate who will ultimately show up next November. It's a big job. It's going to take volunteers. It's going to take time. It's going to take resources. We need your help. We had an amazing Flip the 6th campaign volunteer event at the Lexington West 6 Barrel Room earlier this month. About 50 folks coming together to write postcards to voters that need encouragement and dialogue and engagement to show up for next November's election. If you want to help out, make plans to join us for next month. We're doing the first Monday of the month. That'll be January 5th. We'll be at the back of the Barrel Room there in Lexington's West 6 Brewery. Thanks to those guys for helping support this effort. We need donations of stamps. We need donations of time. If your handwriting is too illegible to be helpful, I understand that. I recognize that. Maybe you're a doctor. Please help make a monthly contribution right now via our secure online website, Act Blue, to help turn Kentucky purple. $6 a month, $16 a month, $6 for the 6th district, $16 for the 16 counties in the 6th district, $600 one time, whatever. It all adds up. I think it's like $61 for a roll of postage stamps. So if you want to help, or the postcard stamps, it's going to help buy us a few rolls of postcards. That'd be awesome. Anyway, whatever you can do, it's all there on our secure Act Blue website, and we support any and all of it. So let's see. Let's now do our check-in with our co-host. And let's hear who's on your biting list. All honor and glory to Tyler, who has released a live version of Biting List. You should check that out. Not right now, but you should definitely think about who's on your biting list. So I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Childsburg in Lexington. And I am putting Brett Guthrie on my biting list. So powerful, so useless. I'm going to read you a quote from the Kentucky Lantern. You let me know who you think said it. Quote, and it's really disappointing that Brett Guthrie, who has 3 EV plants in his district, would be the one that champions it, pushes it through, and doesn't make any changes at all to protect those plants. So, if we have people that lose their jobs or jobs that are not created, your own congressman did it to you. That's really, really wrong. That's a teaser for later on. I'll let you know who said that. If you want to put it in the chat, if you think you have a guess, that's great. But that's my biting list for the day. Nate, are you there?
Check, test, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, everybody. This is Nate Orshan coming live and direct from Frankfurt, where Kit and I live. And I'll do a little side thing and wish the love of my life, Kit O'Connor, a happy birthday. It's coming up on January 3rd. So they left Facebook, but I'm still on there. So come the 3rd, if you want to message me and wish them a happy birthday, I'll pass it along. But to get on to the serious business of biting lists, Yeah, I'll see your Brett Guthrie, and I'll raise you 6 more of our GOP members of Congress, all of whom supported the Big Beautiful Bill Act, I believe, and removed that generous $7,500 tax incentive. Taxes, they're everywhere. That the Biden administration had used to promote buying electric vehicles, and in so doing, that Big Beautiful Bill Act, and so getting that passed, they cut the legs out from under the Kentucky EV battery production, as you'll hear later in the show. So, to all of you,
Nice.
thank
you.
A little.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
High on the hackles.
Yes, that's right.
Coming for you. All right. So, have you seen the live version of the song?
No, I didn't even know about it, so I'm pumped to go. But Kit and I scored tickets to go see him later. I'm not going to say what show because I don't want y'all to come burgle us when we're away. But suffice it to say, at some point in 2026, we will be there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I saw he was playing in Chicago, and that was kind of appealing.
Yeah. And they're adding shows and all kinds of good stuff.
He's also playing at the Jazz Fest in New Orleans.
That would be so great.
That would be pretty great. I'll be honest, though, there's a side of me that's like, I want the full evening with Tyler experience.
Yeah.
I don't want the constrained, festival set. But right. Jazz Fest,
You want a bag full of Tyler, not a single Whitman sampler piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With a big box.
You want the big box, the Tyler big box.
All right. So I will note for the record, Thomas Massey voted against the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which of course.
Okay. I was like, are you sure about that, Nate? Thank you. Okay, I take that back. And actually, so that's we'll be talking about him a little bit later too. So
yeah, sets us up well.
Pin in it.
I will guarantee you it was not because he wanted to maintain the EV tax credits. That's not why he wanted that bill to not pass.
Although his home is solar.
His home is solar.
Yeah.
He's actually a big EV nerd. He likes his EV. I think he's hacked his Tesla. So he's an interesting character. Again, we'll talk more about him later. But let's get into the story. So, news of the week. Got some exciting news of the week. It's a bit of a mixed bag, as I alluded to earlier. But the cool story coming to us out of Louisville is that Kentucky Senate seat District 37. That race was earlier this week. It was Gary Clemens versus Calvin Leach, retired Army veteran Calvin Leach. Clemens, who's the president of the Steelworkers Local 1693. He won that with 72% of the vote. Pretty much smoked Calvin Leach. They talk about Calvin Leach being an Army veteran. Clemens is a veteran too. So he was a veteran. He was a labor leader and really just put the whooping down on the Republican, which is not shocking. It was over about 5,000 votes were cast in the special election, kind of only thing on the ballot, only thing happening. But, folks showed up. I think he's a great candidate for that district. This was, of course, the seat that opened up because David Yates, State Senator David Yates, was appointed to be the Jefferson County clerk. So that's why that vacancy opened up. This is a district that, before we get too excited, it's another special election where the Democrats stomped on the Republicans. This is a district that Kamala won. It's a district that Charles Booker won when he ran against Rand Paul. There's not a lot of those districts out there. It's a district that Andy won, kind of going away. So this is what I would characterize as a safe seat. But love the story that Gary is bringing to Frankfort. And helps bring one more Democratic voice to that body, which needs a lot more because they are a super minority for sure. Anyway, any thoughts about that special election?
Well, so like you said, it's kind of a safe seat, so you got to sort of temper your enthusiasm slightly, but I love the fact that it's kind of a win for proponents of unions, and especially this week, as you'll hear in a little bit. It's unions are continuing to take it on the chin. So to have one of them and a proud supporter get it into higher office, that's just that's music to my ears. So, That's great.
Kudos, congratulations, Gary. Welcome to the Hootenanny, and he's going to get right into it because they're coming into their session beginning of January, so he's not going to have a minute to recharge and recover. He's going to get the holidays and then get right to work.
That's right.
The Republicans are going to be doing everything in their power to kind of ratchet down the income tax rate. They still want that half percentage point and get us down to as close to zero as possible. But it's for sure important that we have good, smart, principled opposition to that, and hopefully we'll give you some good ammunition as to why we don't want to get rid of our income tax from our guests coming to us later today. So at any rate, I think you've got some cool stories to bring us, important information.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a study in contrast, but both coming from the GOP side of the aisle. So the first one we'll look at is, as everyone probably knows, the great film director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were slain in their home over the weekend. Their son Nick is apparently a suspect, and it was just a horrible, horrible thing. But and a reasonable president, of course, might offer condolences and at least hopes and prayers, right? That's kind of like the typical thing. But no, Donald Trump went on to his Truth Social and went on to talk about how Reiner and his wife reportedly, due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. No, TDS stands for the Donald sucks. But so instead of saying, or even shutting up, not saying anything about it whatsoever, he just continued to be a terrible, terrible human being. So, but what happens? Representative Thomas Massie, who we were just talking about earlier, he gets on and says, regardless of how you felt about Rob Reiner, this is inappropriate and disrespectful discourse about a man who was just brutally murdered. I guess my elected GOP colleagues, the VP and White House staff will just ignore it because they're afraid. I challenge anyone to defend it. So when I read that, my jaw just hit the floor because, this guy, this is the same guy who posed for Christmas a few years ago with his family, each of whom, was brandishing a semi-automatic weapon or some such. But that he actually has some empathy and decorum, at least as far as this is concerned. And hats off. I guess and as Aaron pointed out earlier, he did not vote for the big beautiful bill. So I respectfully take Congressman Massie off the Biden list for this week.
Yeah.
So, what did you think when you saw that?
GD again, Massie. Like, we got to give you props for being halfway human, halfway decent, having some ethical lines that you wouldn't cross. And that's just the sad state of affairs, which he calls out in his tweet or truth or whatever the hell it was. Anyone else gonna stand with me here? Which seems like the most reasonable place to be standing. When someone has tragically been murdered, that you show some measure of empathy and sympathy, which Rob Reiner certainly offered Charlie Kirk, and when that tragedy happened. Right? This is just what we should do as humans.
Exactly.
Right? Say the right thing. This is tragic and horrible, and no one deserves this. And Trump is just incapable of even a halfway human response. And that's just sad. Yeah.
And I got to say, I feel just a little bit dirty even repeating his words, because I feel like you don't give trolls oxygen. And that's just god awful trolling on his part. So, but there it is. So that's one really interesting story. And then we'll take a look at this other one. And again, this is more social media posting, but we came across this post from 6th District Congressman Andy Barr. And during an interview in the Brian Kilmeade show, he was talking apparently about no better way to celebrate America's. Oh wait, no, I got to do justice to him.
No better way to celebrate America's 250th year than to put the best president of my lifetime, Donald J. Trump, on a new $200 $50 bill. Tomorrow, I'll be chairing a hearing that will include this historic legislation.
That's how I imagine he sounds anyway. Yeah, I mean, this is the guy who used to be sort of hailed for being like a moderate kind of Republican, even though he was never good on any issue. But yeah, he is all in on bootlicking MAGA palooza, and just falling over himself to try to praise our would-be dictator.
Yeah.
So Mr. Barr, I'm glad you're on my biting list. So y'all better hope I don't get rabies.
Boot licking, ass kissing, money grubbing, mother. This guy is just, he's horrible. I mean, and that he's like, he basically didn't really stand for anything his entire, career in the House, except for like doing what big banks wanted, right? Big banks Barr.
Yeah.
Big bank Barr. Become bootlicker Barr. And he is like 100% focused on, whatever he can do to just shove his nose further up the great one's crevice, so he can, desperate to get the endorsement from Trump for the Senate race. So like, hey, I'll chair a committee about this stupid put your face on a $250 bill, which, like it has to like change the law because law doesn't really allow people who are alive to be on our money. So they have to change the law to put him on this bill that, good God, just really how far have we fallen as a nation?
Yeah.
So sad.
So bye, Andy. Looking forward to you losing the.
We don't call him that around here. We do not call him.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. That's not his real name, is it?
Positive Andy associations for that guy. His name is
Garland
Hale Barr the Fourth.
Garland
Hale Barr the Fourth. The more people know that's his name, I think the fewer votes he's going to get. Also, you can call him Bootlicker Barr. I think you can, but yeah, we should not.
That works for me. I'll work on that. On that one. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the rundown. Now the big story. This is like a huge story, and it's just a disappointing story. This is, of course, the biggest economic development projects in the history of our state. Governor Andy Beshear very proudly landed the BlueOval SK, the Ford EV battery factory, the twin factories, right? Is the vision. And this was all about, Ford kind of making a transition to really scale up their EV ambitions. This was, of course, met with, a lot of people were making investments. GM's made similar investments, LG, and I think it's LG and GM that have their joint efforts. There's big factories, Hyundai, big factories in Georgia, Rivian, which is an EV only manufacturer. Tesla and Panasonic have a new factory that they've launched in Kansas. Big, huge investments, meaning thousands of jobs. But all of these investments were kind of predicated on a policy landscape that included, the IRA tax credits continuing through the life of that legislation, which was another few years. This was, kind of the crowning achievement of the Biden administration in a very divided Congress, but got the bill through, through reconciliation, right? And so this, landed these factories, thousands of jobs. But now, because of the Trump administration, and they're like, really, they are the most anti-EV, like everything in their power they can possibly do to remove incentives or encouragement for EV manufacturing, whether that's the CAFE standards, corporate average fuel efficiency standards, those are going away. No fines or penalties if you don't meet CAFE standards, greatly ratcheting down the standards that the Biden administration's EPA had set. All emissions standards the EPA had put in place. All sorts of different things. Along with that, very significant tax credit, right? That's $7,500, which is available if the EV was built in America and if it didn't have parts from China. So, the investments that were being made in Hardin County were so that Ford could take advantage of all the tax credits, get the full suite of tax credits by having those made in America vehicles and powertrains. And it meant a lot of jobs. And now that's, dissolved, right? And that is they've announced they're kind of divorcing from SK On. That's the South Korean battery manufacturer that was really leading the manufacturing tech. So they had a big facility in Tennessee as well. Ford is keeping the Hardin County facility. SK On is keeping the Tennessee facility. Ford is basically really scaling back their EV ambitions because they don't have that tax credit, because they don't have other incentives, because they don't have rules that require them to overall decrease their efficiency or increase their efficiency. So and decrease their emissions. So again, Trump has even gone so far as to remove California's ability to have more exacting clean air standards, because they've, it's written into the Clean Air Act that California can set stronger standards because they've long had problems with air pollution in California. But, Ford, Trump is so anti-EV. He's doing everything in his power to remove any incentive or encouragement for the fuel of our vehicles to go from oil to domestically produced electrons, right? So it's really sad. I guess apparently if you stand up and say, hey, oil industry, if you give me $1 billion, I'll do whatever you want. It should be a pretty long list of things that the oil industry wants, but that don't get it twisted. This is 100% one of the things that they want. And so the oil industry is getting their way right now, and it's only costing thousands and thousands of jobs, which is just a devastation. And Ford's taking a big write-off. I think $19.5 billion, of bad investments basically. But they are still saying they're going to make a profit this year if they write off that. But yeah, it's just it's a sad state of affairs. What I really did appreciate, and somebody called it, I think. Halee knew who it was. But yeah, so that was Governor Beshear calling out Brett Guthrie, who is the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, who had a huge role to play in writing the big ugly bill, right? Which was that rug pull on those EV tax credits. I'm sorry. And the fact that he was willing to do that, despite knowing that it would jeopardize, literally thousands of jobs in his district. He was willing to do that because the kind of pressure from on high, the kind of everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid there. No one wanted to get out of step with the Trump administration. Obviously, Thomas Massie was willing to, and that was the first step in the fight that Massie and Trump got into, and now Trump has recruited somebody to run against Massie and is dumping money into that guy's dark money coffers. So yeah, it's not to say that there weren't some disincentives that were there, but yeah, the fact that Brett Guthrie has been in Congress for so long and is the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee and is willing to throw his constituents under the bus because of a irrational hatred of anything that doesn't run on oil coming from the president. And I talked to a lot of these offices, and they knew that there were real questions about what would happen under the new policy landscape. There was lots of estimates that showed as much as 80% of the battery factories were going to evaporate if these tax policies were changed. So it was an eyes wide open situation. And now that is what it is. But what we really wanted to do today and this week is turn to our friend Hadlee Hadfield, who of course we've had on the show before, who was one of the organizers at BlueOval. Discuss, who was, worked really hard to make sure that factory was going to be a union shop. And now, just big question marks for this industry. So Halee, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I've been better. Definitely been better. I will tell you that. We got this announcement from Michael Adams, our CEO, I think Monday or Tuesday. And after I saw that video around 4:15 that afternoon, I was in tears the rest of the evening because what the hell am I going to do? The job market is crap. There are hardly any jobs out here. I would end up taking a significant pay cut just to maintain employment, to go anywhere else. And so would everyone else that I work with. 1,600 people that have come here because Bosque was promised as a lifeline. I went to Bosque, as I've told you before, because I thought I was going to have free health insurance, and I should have known when I went to orientation that I was being lied to. because I got handed a packet with menu prices basically saying, hey, this is what your health insurance is going to cost you. Good luck. And the pay isn't bad, but it could be better. It could be more in accordance with industry standards. Not that that really matters now because of the big ugly bill, but we're all kind of in a position of, oh no, what do I do now? It's this threw all of us for a loop. If you saw the clip that I was in with WDRB, I said it there and I'll say it again. Michael Adams is and was a coward to tell all of us, hey, you're out of a job in 60 days via video, probably from his home in Michigan. Good for you, dude. I'm glad that you get to go back to Ford and keep your cushy salary and keep your cushy life, because he's never going to see all of the effects that this will have, not just on the 1,600 employees that are being laid off, but on the entire county. Okay, hundreds of apartments being thrown up as quickly as they can get them built, because they anticipated 5,000-ish people coming out here to work at Bossk. And now that that's not a thing, people are having to go back and reassess the loans for raw land, for building materials, for even finishing these apartment complexes. And I've told several people these apartment complexes are going to sit empty because they're upwards of $2,000. That's more than 60% of what I was bringing home on a monthly basis when I was still fully employed, if you will. So my prediction is that those apartments will sit vacant until the rents are decreased, or until adults who are desperate enough go and squat in them, and bored teenagers will go break into them and vandalize them and do whatever. They're going to end up abandoned buildings, just like a bunch of other stuff you see out here in Hardin County. And Michael Adams and Mark Halee, they'll never see the effects of that, and they won't care, because it has nothing to do with them. They don't have to lose their jobs. They were what we refer to as Ford secundies. They are contracted employees from Ford who were sent out here and tasked with getting this plant up and running, getting people hired on, and making this successful. I can't fully lay it at their feet. I understand that this big ugly bill did play a big part in this, but damn it, this didn't have to happen. So thanks, Brett Guthrie. You're so helpful. You're definitely on my biting list.
Yeah,
I'll take your leg off.
It's just sad to see, because I think a lot of like county leaders and surrounding counties, we're just really thrilled about the jobs, about the investments, those kind of knock-on effects, right? And then to see it all evaporate, although maybe it won't. I mean, sure, they're like, oh, if you can apply for your job back when we set up this business model that we weren't actually even going to get into. But now we have to do something with the capacity, right? It just doesn't seem like much of a sure thing, that's for sure.
Well, but what are we supposed to do in the meantime? I mean, we're going to sit around for a year on unemployment? Last I checked, that only lasts for 12 weeks. I still have bills to pay. I have a car payment. I have rent to pay. I have to pay for medication. I have cats that I like to feed sometimes, so they don't scream at me. I like to eat sometimes, What are the rest of us going to do? A lot of us have kids. We have kids to take care of. We have spouses. I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah, not the holiday message you wanted to get, for sure. And the fact
Absolutely
that you
not.
come and walk the factory floor and talk to people face to face and eye to eye, little cowardly for sure. But definitely, our heart goes out to you, Halee, and all the other BlueOval workers. And it is, again, it's like, this is nothing that anybody wanted, but a few people certainly made decisions that made it way more likely that it was going to happen. Don't let people slide on this. It was eyes wide open decisions were made. Brett Guthrie knew the very real possibility that this was going to happen. And all the Republicans who went along with the big ugly bill, knew or should have known, because there were a lot of people sharing a lot of information about what was at stake, and if they bothered to pay any attention. And I know that personally, we brought the information to Brett Guthrie's office and had a conversation with their staff about what was at stake for his own district. So really just heartbreaking to see it happen. And everyone, fingers crossed for you that you find the right spot to land at, Halee.
Thank you.
Nate, any thoughts? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm just so sorry, and my heart breaks for you and for everybody who's been laid off. And I guess the first question is, you know, is there anything that anyone who's listening to this right now or watching can do to help? Are there any funds that that have been set up, or anything like
I
that?
I don't know of any kind of public fund or like GoFundMe to support people who have been laid off. We are getting paid and retaining health insurance for the next 60 days. And to my knowledge, people are very selectively being called to return to work so that they can finish up, pardon me, processing cells and getting them built into modules so that they can be sent off to Ford before they finally officially discontinue production of the F-150 Lightning. Um, but again, I do mean selectively because it really looks like the people that they are calling to return to work to finish up whatever tasks may remain are people who did not publicly support unionization.
Yeah.
So if we can get to a point where we can meet the burden of proof in court to show that, Bosk will have hell to pay. I can promise you that.
Yeah, like a retaliation, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It would not surprise me one bit to find out that me and all of my other immediate coworkers are not going to get called back just because we all wore a red shirt every Wednesday that said future UAW member. It's a shirt. What do you want me to do? Come to work with no clothes on? That's kind of weird. I don't want to do that.
Halee, keeping the sense of humor for sure, which we appreciate. Please let us know if there is a GoFundMe that starts up, or if there's anything you think we can do to help spread the word about how to support workers as they transition. But yeah, really do appreciate that. You guys are like kind of cogs in a big machine, and it wasn't your decision that led to this result. And that is just annoying and frustrating to no end.
Oh, absolutely. But I will tell you all that our fight for our union is not over either. We actually just finished up a hearing today with the National Labor Relations Board to determine communities of interest between accepted ballots and challenge ballots when we had our election in August. So hopefully we'll hear something back about that sometime shortly before or after Christmas. And hopefully there will be some other positive avenue where we can either find gainful employment at Kentucky Truck Plant or be awarded positions within Louisville Assembly Plant, despite them about to go on like a 10, 11-ish month layoff for retooling or something.
Yeah.
Something is better than nothing, and I'll take it.
Yeah, no, and it seems like that would give you more tools for sure to negotiate.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that one for sure. Because one thing, Ford is like not completely out of the EV game. They've got their Skunk Works truck, their $30,000. The target being a $30,000 price tag truck that they want to continue to build, or not continue, but continue to intend to build that in Louisville when it's ready. This is their like China, challenging China truck is the vision. We will see. I do think that this announcement shows that they're kind of giving up a lot in their fight against China in terms of the future of the auto industry. But yeah, just sad.
I mean, if they want to try and challenge China, they're about 20 years behind. If you want some interesting reading to go and look at, you should go look at CATL, CATL. It's a Chinese company that has developed modular EVs. So, and I've even seen videos of it online where they'll be in their CATL made Chinese EV, and they can go to a station, and rather than get an oil change, they get their battery module changed.
Yeah, it's an interesting model. I've seen
amazing.
that. Yep, that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it.
It's an interesting model for sure. I will say this: I think China came on quick, and the fact that we're kind of giving up some of the landscape seems like a bad idea to me. But what do I know? Anyway, thanks so much, Halee. We've got to move on.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, again, you know how to get me. Do not hesitate to do so if there's anything we can do for BlueOval workers. All right, so next, really thrilled to be chatting about tax policy. Exciting that we've had a chance to be talking with Vanessa Williamson, who is the author of The Price of Democracy, The Revolutionary Power of Taxation and American History. She's a senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution, a senior fellow at the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center, author or co-author of 2 previous books. Her writings appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Nation, and elsewhere. Lives in D.C., where I just was last week. And this book is an eye-opening history of taxation, showing that battles over taxes have always really been battles over democracy itself. She landed a very solid blurb. Quote, I love this book. American democracy has always been based on the right of the people themselves to create a state that serves their needs, and oligarchs determined to destroy that state have always fought taxes. A colorful and interesting trip through American history, The Price of Democracy, makes a convincing case that we must take back the power of taxation to restore our democracy. The history of taxes has never been more interesting or more important than it is right now. And in Williamson's hands, it comes alive. So that quote comes to us from Heather Cox Richardson, who, if you, like me, start your day with her news and history summary, pretty great get to have on your dust cover. Congratulations and welcome, Vanessa.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
So thrilling to have you and really appreciate you sharing the book with us. It was a great read. I'll be honest, I didn't finish all of it, but I got through the vast majority. I promise I will finish it. But what I found really interesting is, it kind of opens with, the kind of history of the colonialists and what they're going through, and it really seems like it dovetails really well with Ken Burns' Civil War, or which is like not Civil War, sorry, but like it's right now. People are watching on PBS or just watched it on PBS. I would suggest they get your book to have more of the backstory of what happened, and because it wasn't just about the Tea Party, right? The Stamp Act had probably a bigger influence on this, folks earlier on. I don't know. You tell me though. Like, what do you think about that Ken Burns documentary, and what do you think most important in your book in terms of providing more light and color?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a wonderful thing for Americans to learn more about our history. I think it would help us a lot in terms of thinking about where we're headed next. I mean, in terms of the history, unfortunately, when it comes to taxation, we've been told a fairy tale for a long time. So, just as an example, you mentioned Stamp Act. One thing that people probably think they know about American history is what happened in the Boston Tea Party. All right, we all know that the colonists went down to the wharf at Griffin's Wharf in Boston Harbor, and they boarded these ships and threw tea into the harbor. Right. Well, what most people think is that was about. What was it about? Why were they throwing the tea in the harbor? Oh, obviously it was because they were mad about taxes, and that's true. But here's what they were actually mad about: a tax cut, a corporate tax cut. Yeah, the Parliament was in bed with a very powerful corporation known as the East India Company, and that company was struggling, and Parliament deemed it too big to fail, and so they bailed out that company with lots of money, and they also gave the East India Company a special tax break to sell tea on the cheap in the colonies. And even though it made their tea cheaper, American colonists did not like that. As Sam Adams, who was the head of the Sons of Liberty, which organized that raid on these ships, Sam Adams said that the tax cut was introductive of monopolies that was a danger to public liberty. So this story that actually in our history was a radical piece of critique of corporate power, and corporate power particularly when aligned with government. It was direct action. It was property destruction. It was very radical at the time. Everyone understood that. Now we've sanitized it, and we've really perverted that history. And it's a conservative touchstone when it should in fact be a progressive one. So so I'm always glad when people are learning more of our history, because I think if they learn an accurate history, there's a reason people censor textbooks, right? It's because history is dangerous. It's powerful. And so, I'm thrilled that more people are learning the actual story of our history and less of the old myths. And I think that, my book is I hope, like a little tiny part of that effort. In terms of what I think it says overall for the moment today. So, I'll show you. So the book is The Price of Democracy. And what I argue is that taxes are the price of democracy. They are the thing that makes democracy function, both because when governments are reliant on taxes, they end up with systems of representation because they're dependent on their taxpayers, right? So taxes are what give officials the incentive to pay attention to what people want. And taxes are also the money that allows us to do things, right? It's the money that funds the state. So if you want government to do something after it's elected, if you want our elected officials to be more than having a debating club, they have to have enough money to act, and especially to act against private power. They need to be strong enough to do that. So throughout our history and throughout world history, the conservative myth is that taxation is tyranny. The opposite is true. Tyrants hate taxes. They try and avoid them. there's a reason that the IRS was gutted this year. And that's been true again and again, that people who hate democracy try to undermine the tax system. That way, if they lose an election, they still haven't lost power because the government's too weak to hold them to account.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason, right? The kind of conservative movement really wanted to be able to shrink government down to the size they could drown it in a bathtub, right? And that's by taking away resources, by taking away the services that it provides for people. So we are a Kentucky focused news show. So I gotta ask you to tell us a little bit about the Whiskey Rebellion and kind of what that should tell us about efforts, to get better taxation.
Absolutely. So there is a stereotype. I don't know how much it holds in Kentucky, but certainly nationally, that there's a sort of picture of frontiersmen in Kentucky and elsewhere as sort of hard drinking, violent, log cabin, and haters of taxation, haters of government. Actually, while the frontiersmen were indeed hard drinking and often violent, they supported more progressive taxation. And that's what the Whiskey Rebellion was about. So this happens in Western Pennsylvania. And what had happened was Alexander Hamilton, now widely misunderstood thanks to a musical, but Alexander Hamilton wanted to consolidate the whiskey industry. What he wanted was to make the American economy, which had a lot of small farmers, a lot more like the British economy. That is to say, an economy that was industrialized, right? So he, in some ways, he's not like a conservative of today where they want to enrich rich people by destroying the state. In that time, they wanted to enrich rich people by building the state. But it was a state specifically for the rich and for the mercantile elite and for a new industrial class that he imagined, right? So when he puts in, he literally drafts the tax legislation. He's the Secretary of the Treasury, but he drafts the tax legislation and sends it to Congress as his example of what they should do. And what Alexander Hamilton, who was a genius, understood, and what most people in Congress did not, was the taxes were set up in a way that would punish small distillers and reward some important political friends of the administration. So, and it was all in the details, right? So you would really have to know what you were doing to see this if you weren't in the whiskey industry. But you could pay your full taxes up front if you had that kind of money. And then you would pay less than if you had to pay over time. And you had to pay, if you had a smaller still, it actually worked out to be much more expensive. And then, of course, there were all these sort of measures that were intended to make it, if you missed your taxes, that you'd have to go to court in a distant town, which a small distiller couldn't afford to do. It was intended to drive people out of business, right? And he actually provoked, actively, in his letters, you can see this, provoked controversy on the frontier because he wanted to put down frontier rebellion, right? And the farmers didn't take this lying down, right? They had just fought a revolution, right? And so when they thought that the government was being unfair, they blocked roads and tarred and feathered officials, right? Just as they had done with the British. And Hamilton was not going to stand for that. And so he devises a particularly regressive set of taxes intended to consolidate an industry and to drive small farming businesses out of business. Because the only way you could make money if you're on the frontier, you couldn't get your grain back over the mountains. You had to distill it into whiskey because that was the only thing you could afford to transport, right? So you're really going to drive these folks out of business. And he wanted a rebellion and he got one. And so that's the story of the Whiskey Rebellion. What did the farmers want? They weren't saying, oh, we won't pay taxes. In fact, there's this amazing moment, hard to imagine, where these Western farmers, they organize their militia, they're going to block roads, they're really angry about the taxes, and particularly about the fact that some of their people are going to get taken back over the mountains to be tried, so all of their crops are going to rot because no one's going to be on the farm. And they're real mad about this, and they're going down to the tax collector's office to complain about it. And they're a militia, right? They've got their muskets on their shoulders, they got fife and drum, they're marching there, and they stop literally on the dirt road. Because one of their members, this is a very democratic society, right? This is, direct democracy. One of their members had a question. They were going to give a letter to the tax collector saying, you got to hand over those writs. You can't be taking our people across the mountains. But the one member of the militia said, hey, wait, I don't think we're being clear enough that we're willing to pay taxes. So right there on the road, they stop and debate, and they add some extra language to say that they're willing to pay a proportionate share of the taxes, right? But they don't want to pay an unfair share of the taxes because they knew the rich guys, including the tax collector, who was himself a large distiller, they knew that the rich people were getting away with not paying their share, right? And so they right there, they stop on the road to write it into their demands that they're an armed militia delivering. that they didn't mind paying their fair share of the taxes. A proportionate share was fine, but they wanted rich people to pay their part, and that meant land taxes in particular. Because one of the things that wealthy people did was buy huge amounts of land on the frontier as a speculation. They never farmed it, but it meant land was unavailable for regular people, and so they wanted to switch to a tax system that was based on land rather than these very regressive taxes on their tiny businesses.
I love that. The quick vote on the side of the road as they're marching their militia to tar and feather the tax collector. Like, wait, guys, gotta make sure
we got to talk
on our side, which I think feel like I've been part of that protest before, actually. All right, so Nate, you have a question for Vanessa? You're muted, Nate.
I keep muting myself. Sorry. I'm loving this kind of trend of action for fair taxation, not action against taxation per se, and that's really eye-opening. But going along the other side, I'm wondering if any American political leader has ever had any luck convincing citizens that paying taxes is actually patriotic and virtuous. Have we ever seen someone or a movement like that?
Absolutely. It's an amazing loss of our history that seems impossible today. It has happened again and again. Most recently with LBJ. He went straight to the American people and said, I'm going to raise your taxes. And he told them how much it was from every paycheck. And the thing you're going to get, it's Medicare. He did that. Before that, it was FDR. FDR said, you're going to have a tax, and it's going to come out of your paychecks, and it's going to pay for a thing we're calling Social Security. And this was in the height of the Depression. People did not have a lot of extra dollars to pay. And I'll tell you, business tried to capitalize on that in the next election, right? They put all these propaganda statements in people's pay envelopes where it said, you are sentenced to pay a tax, right? This is what the factory owners put in their workers' envelopes. You are sentenced to pay a $1 tax out of every paycheck to pay for some benefit you don't even know if you're ever going to get. Because remember, Social Security was a new program. We didn't have it yet. Then, so if you want to reverse this, vote against FDR. Well, what the union stewards and the Democratic Party said about this. They're like, do you know why the boss didn't put that in your pay, propaganda in your pay stub last election? It's because there was no pay stub. There was no paychecks, right? And it was FDR who'd gotten us out of the worst parts of the Depression. And so it didn't work. People voted FDR in yet again. And they didn't mind paying a payroll tax. They still don't mind paying a payroll tax, right? It's the most popular federal tax that there is, and people know they pay it. So, and in fact, if you look at public opinion data, to this day, this has never moved. If you ask people, is it every American's civic duty to pay their fair share of taxes? Do you know what fraction of Americans say yes? Over 90% every time for decades. All right, that is as close to consensus as Americans have ever gotten on anything. I tried to find other poll questions with similar results. Do you know what you have to ask? You have to ask things like, is Elvis alive? Did we actually land on the moon? That's where you get 90% of Americans to agree. It's really hard to do. So the American people still see taxpaying as a civic responsibility. They, 70, 80% will call it patriotic. So the people have always been there on this. Their leaders have let them down terribly. And the cowardice on this, right? When it comes to just saying something straightforward, like people can't understand a price and what they're getting for it, as if they don't go to the store all the time and make decisions like that. But somehow we can't tell them that, if you want universal childcare, that's going to cost some money. Here's how much money it'll cost. It'll be less than you're paying, right? So there's an extraordinary failure, I would say, on the part of the contemporary and entire lifetime generations of politicians who've been unwilling to treat Americans as adults. Government money, and it's worth paying. I'll tell you, the story of people being pro-tax goes back further. The Populist Party, they wanted in their platform, they called for an income tax. This was before we had while the income tax had been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Another story we could talk about. They said that they wanted income tax, and they said they wanted to expand government like the post office, so that it was in every town, so that it had the power to end poverty. People used to say things like, it's generally agreed. That's what they said. It's generally agreed that we don't pay taxes now because of the benefits we receive, but because the state is part of us, right? Like it's unimaginable today that this would be generally agreed. But once upon a time, politicians absolutely did that. And you got to ask yourself why they're so unwilling to lead today when the data isn't there to suggest that the people wouldn't listen.
It seems like that's part of your story again and again, is the kind of fight around an income tax. That could be very much like ripped from the headlines here in Kentucky. We've got, a bill they passed a few sessions ago to kind of ratchet down our income tax, taking it from 4% to 3.5% with automatic triggers to take it down half a percentage point kind of each and every year, because again, they want to get rid of it because they also, the Republican supermajority also doesn't mind cutting services, right? So it's a win-win for them. But, it does seem like it's a pretty hard fight to get an income tax. So, it seems like we should not be giving up the fight to move towards less progressive taxation. One thing that we see right now, ripped from the headlines, is this kind of historic reliance on tariffs versus an income tax. So tell us a little bit more about the kind of tariffs, the history of tariffs, and why they weren't actually better for the kind of everyday Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. For most of our history, most federal revenue came from tariffs. The first income tax was put in place during the Civil War to fund the Union war effort. It was actually an important part of why the Union won the war, because they could, there was a Confederate general who said afterwards that they hadn't been beaten on the battlefield, they were beaten in the Treasury Department, right? Because the Union could just mobilize money. And Southern slave owners had crippled democracy in their own states. They had repeatedly undermined in North Carolina and Virginia and South Carolina. They were always afraid that non-slave owning white men, who were the majority, would eventually put a tax on slavery high enough to achieve abolition, because slavery was bad for small farmers. And so they had undermined democracy in their own states, and they'd undermined federal democracy with the 3/5 clause. And so the Confederacy was never able to tax, even though they had some very, very rich people. They were never able to tax, and it helped the Union war effort. So we have an income tax during the Civil War. It's allowed to expire afterwards. It wasn't clear what we would do with money. We had a very small federal government at the time. And then in 1894, a more sort of populist progressive force comes to power in Congress. They want to bring back the income tax because we've been relying on these tariffs. And not like tariffs today, because tariffs today, I'd have to check the news to see what the tariffs are at the moment, right? We have like a completely bonkers tariff regime. They had a very stable and very high tariff regime that actually raised a lot of revenue. You couldn't do it today. It's just not how the economy works anymore. But that's what they had. And but like tariffs today, they fall on consumers. That's what tariffs do. They cost people when they go to the store because it makes things more expensive, right? So that part's exactly the same. And people back then knew. And so, but the tariffs were really, really high back then. And so the tariffs, and also they produced a lot. I mean, we didn't have a global economy in the same way. So you could really tariff things in a far more effective way 150 years ago. And so these tariffs were in place. They were really high. They were costing consumers a fortune, and they were making a very small number of people extremely rich because they basically allowed for U.S. companies to be monopolies, another thing that we're facing today. And they could jack up prices. And people hated them. People hated the tariff. They wanted an income tax. And so Congress passes an income tax in 1894. And this it's very, very similar to the one we had without any trouble in the Civil War period. But now we have in that period, there's a much more conservative Supreme Court. This is the Supreme Court that's about to decide Plessy v. Ferguson. This is the Supreme Court that's about to say that child labor is A-OK, right? And so as a part of that deeply conservative move of the Supreme Court in the Gilded Age, they say, oh, no, even though we had every precedent said you could have an income tax, they decide, oh, no, an income tax is unconstitutional. What was their grounds? Oh, well, it was the direct tax clause, which is right there next to the 3/5 clause as part of the compromise to defend slavery. When I said earlier that slave owners didn't want, they were terrified of democracy because they might tax slavery out of existence. One of the ways they prevented that was to put in every tax limitation in our federal constitution was a defense of slavery. So one of them said that direct taxes had to be apportioned by state. I can get into that level of detail if you would like. It's a little bit boring, but it basically makes direct taxes impossible for the federal government to assign because every state would have to pay based on their population. This is crazy. So when the Supreme Court decides that, actually, even though we've had an income tax, it's a direct tax, they're relying on the defense that the slave oligarchy had used to defend itself to protect the new oligarchy of Gilded Age industrial wealth. Now we've got no income tax, right? Well, people are really angry because they are feeling these tariffs. They are driving up prices. And so there's a state-by-state campaign to get an income tax back. And it went gangbusters all over the West, right? The Western states were very radical. The Western states wanted much more government than they had because they knew they were getting that their state governments were being, basically in the pocket of big corporations. And they passed it. The South passes it. So they're mostly not rich states there. And so that not only, even though there's a long anti-tax tradition that came out of this slave oligarchy tradition, there were a lot of working class people who were like, absolutely, we wanted income tax. And they even managed to pass an income tax amendment in the Northeast. It was a big fight in New York. J.D. Rockefeller really went to the mat to try and kill the income tax amendment, but he failed. And so thanks to 3/4 of the state, in fact, more than 3/4 of the states vote to amend the Constitution so that we can have an income tax. And that's, I think, a fascinating story for us to think about today. Because once again, we've got tariffs. I mean, they're much crazier now, but we've got, once again, got tariffs that are driving up prices. And once again, people are trying to destroy the tax system that applies to wealthy people, right? Putting rich people above the law. And I think there's no reason to think that the popular movement to make the tax system more fair would not find similarly fertile ground.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point to take away, and I think we'll leave it there. I think it's really important to think through how our tax history has in fact helped level the playing field, but it's not been a kind of a steady leveling, right? It seems like it's like everything in our history. It peaks and valleys, and right now, really important time to think about it as we see our inequality reaching those historic levels, and I think we do need to think about solutions for that. So you've really, I think, helped seed the conversation by making sure that people have the tools and the resources to know the facts about our history and our history of taxation. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for writing the book, and I hope everyone checks it out.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, so we need to wrap it up. We've had a long show with a lot of great information coming to you. I hope you've appreciated it. But thanks again to Vanessa Williamson for joining us. Check out that book. There will be a link to the bookshop.org page in our show notes. Thanks again to Halee Hadfield joining us to talk about what's going on with BlueOval, the sad news out of that factory in Hardin County. And of course, let's remember who brought that on us, and that was the one ugly bill, and pretty much everyone in the Republican delegation for Kentucky, including Chairman Brett Massey. So I'll hand it to you to close us out. But man, thanks for joining me this week, Nate.
It's been a pleasure, Aaron. Thanks so much, and what an honor to be joining on such a auspicious occasion. So, Progress Kentucky, who are we? We are a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State, organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project and Common Ground Kentucky Action, and are also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Please join us for our next show next year, January 7th. We're taking a 2-week holiday break. Hope everyone gets some time with friends and family over the holidays. But while we won't be on your feed or your Facebook, make sure to check out our Forward Kentucky Network partners. So Bruce Maples' Moving Kentucky Forward has some great recent interviews you might want to check out, including Zach Dembo and last week, and Amy McGrath recently over on his show. Or check out Robert and Jasmine over on My Old Kentucky Podcast. I just listened this morning. It was a good episode. My Old Kentucky Podcast, they just did a deep dive on Charles Booker's Senate campaign. Yes, looking closely at his past statewide efforts and what we can learn from those races as we look at the 2026 midterms. We'll be back in January covering the session, and on January 21st, we're going to be joined by More Perfect Union's John Russell, who's done amazing work on the interwebs covering progressive politics from a rural and working class perspective. In production of episode 240, can you believe it, guys? 240? Woo-woo! Was by Parker Williams. Also, woo-woo! Nate Orshan, that's me, wrote and performed our theme song, referring to himself in the third person. You can find more information and music at natosongs.com, natosongs.com. And if you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcasts and our show notes are available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you do listen to the pod, please give us a 5-star review wherever you are listening right now. Thanks. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.